Well, good day to you. It is June the 21st, and I hope you are having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. Now, if you are new to Search for Signs, I would love to welcome you to this channel and introduce myself. My name is Gary Willing, and what do we talk about? Well, we talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We talk about why are the Masters coming back now along with the teacher? Why is it important that they're doing so at this particular time? And, of course, what does it mean for you and everybody else that are doing this? Now, if you have some questions you want to ask about this and you don't mind posting your question as a comment, I would recommend doing that. That way I can answer the question in the next video. It gives us something to talk about. That's why I love questions, and I have some questions to cover in this video. You can also email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. Now, if you're somebody who has a lot of questions about what I just said, wants to know more about it for yourself, doesn't particularly want to ask questions publicly, that's fine. I recommend just checking out some of the links in the description of each and every one of these videos. That way you can start doing your own research and start looking at this and getting some more background information for yourself. And if I could take it a step further and possibly, maybe, recommend checking out the Share International website. Link is in the description, share-international.org. It is a wonderful resource of information about Maitreya. It gives background information on this, talks about the many miracles that have been going on all around the world in all walks of life, talks about the teacher's solution to the problems that are facing humanity, the very simple solutions to the problems that are facing humanity. You can hear some of the talks and interviews that Benjamin Creme did while he was alive and so forth. And you can get a better understanding of this information than you can anywhere else. So hopefully you'll check that out, and that will get you going and get you started. So anywho, without further ado, let's get on into the video here. Now, I do have some questions to cover, and before I try to answer the questions, I wanted to say something real quick. I've noticed over the past few weeks and months that more and more people are starting to talk about an economic bubble that's about to collapse. A lot of so-called economic experts are talking about it for sure. Perhaps you've seen it. Perhaps you've been concerned about it, don't know what it means, and so forth. Might I just talk about it for just a second? A few things. You might not know this, but Maitreya has actually spoken about a global stock market crash for some time. He actually made the prediction that the economies around the world would start to collapse in the late 80s. Now, in the world of agreement, since then, you would not agree with that the economies have been collapsing, but they really have, because you might be looking at the markets and how high the markets are all in the United States and all around the world, and that is supposedly a sign that everything is well. But is it well or not? Well, if you peel back some of the curtain, you'd realize that you'd start to see, as some of these other people are starting to say, that the economies aren't doing very well. In fact, they're doing quite poorly, and it's only a matter of time before they implode. Now, it doesn't have to be quite as frightening as these people are putting out. I also think that the people who are perpetuating these, I think they're speaking the truth, but they're also perpetuating the fear about the truth that the stock markets are going to crash, because it's so ingrained in all our minds, and especially in the pundits that are talking about it, that we must have a good economy to survive. We can't survive without a good economy. Well, the economy has always been supporting the few at the expense of the many. Well, we're moving into a time when that's going to flip. The economies around the world will support all of us without the exclusion of the poor, for instance. Meeting the needs of everyone, I guess, is a better way of saying it. So we're moving into that time. That's why the teacher is coming back along with these group of masters of wisdom in order to show us the way forward, to help us rebuild our economic and our political structures and so forth. And that's why I keep talking about it, this information from that perspective. I get a lot of religious questions, and it's okay for me to answer those questions as best I can, but this is not a religious channel. And the teacher's not even coming back as a religious leader. He made a promise to the religious groups to come back at some point. But he's coming back because the crisis that is facing humanity is that of an economic and political crisis, actually. If you look at the environment, it is an economic there's an economic reason why we're living in the environment that we're living in, is because companies are concerned only about profit over our own health, right? So that has to change, and it's not going to change on its own. So the structures that have been supporting that injustice are starting to collapse. So if we look at it from that standpoint, if we maybe look at what's going to happen and what people are starting to talk about from a slightly different angle, we won't be quite as afraid about, the very immediate future. Maitreya says, and has said, that all will be well, all manner of things will be well, is one thing. Two, one of the masters referred to the experience that countries such as the United States, who are quite wealthy, will have to go through. He referred to it as the wilderness experience. When people in the United States who are used to living in relative luxury, having all their needs met at an instant, will eventually have to live more simply. They have to simplify their life in order for others to live. And like I said, I don't think it's going to happen voluntarily. Something's going to have to occur in their own lives, like an economic crisis, in order for that to change, for them to see that they can't live like the way that they've been living. Now, I do think we had a taste of the wilderness experience. We did back in the 2008, and then slightly more last year during the lockdowns. But in the coming time, it's going to be quite necessary for each one of us that live in the United States to live a more simpler lifestyle for ourselves. And then we'll start to see that it's actually going to allow others to live, like I noticed last year with the lockdowns. It cleaned the environment up. We weren't polluting it quite as much, and so did it buy us some time? I do think it did. In the future with a stock market crash, it's going to bring us to our senses that we cannot continue to live the way that we're living. So hopefully we'll, look at the future stock market crash, or the current stock market crash, I guess is a better way of saying it, with a bit more joy and hope than we would if we didn't know this information. But all will be well. All manner of things will be well. I do really believe that. Alrighty, now let's get on into the questions here. All right, so the first question is coming from the image, and there were some replies to it, and I want to kind of talk about some of the replies. So who talks for Maitreya? Benjamin Creme used to, but he passed. And then somebody wrote in there, Maitreya speaks for himself. And I do see where you're coming from with that. The truth. And then you said, the image said, on the Share International website tells different. Benjamin Creme used to interpret his words to us. So since Benjamin Creme died, there are no new news on Maitreya. Well, I've always described my relationship with Benjamin Creme as this. I knew him for years. I knew him perhaps better than some, not as well as others, but I did know him pretty well. And people, even when he was alive, was saying, well, you're not coming out with any new news, right? And he would always say, well, the information that comes from the masters that he was receiving from his own master, and even from Maitreya, is not meant to be interpreted as news. So for us to want something new about this information, well, people were complaining about that with Benjamin Creme back when he was alive, too. So it would stand to reason that we would think there was nothing new coming out now that he's passed away. Now, I don't claim to have any kind of connections with any of these masters other than my own personal experiences, but in terms of any kind of telepathic information coming from them, I don't claim it because I don't have it. I do think, and might make a suggestion for you to think about, whoever the image is and whoever else is maybe perhaps frustrated about the fact that they knew this information maybe when Benjamin Creme was alive, and since then nothing new has come out. This information that, and even when, the information that Benjamin Creme published in the Share International magazine, in his books, in all his videos and so forth, it's not stale. It's just you're not doing anything with it. If you take this information and you look at it, you start to apply it to your life, it becomes alive. It's just like the Bible. If you look at the Bible from a self-help book and try to live within its principles, it becomes alive. It's not a ritual, it's not a book of rituals or of dead, lifeless, information. And if you go back even further, people talked about that with the Old Testament, with Jesus. Jesus said, that God is alive. You can see him in nature. He says, heaven is as near as your hand. He says, heaven is at hand. It's it's as close to you as your own hand. You don't have to read it in a book, But might I also suggest, when it comes to this information, if you share this information on whatever level you believe it, it starts to become more real for you. And you start to help spread joy and hope in other people's lives who might be quite hopeless and downhearted about the future. So don't keep this information to yourself. If you haven't shared it with somebody, share it, as Maitreya says, share it with all who will listen, whether it's on YouTube like me or in your own personal life, it doesn't matter. Just share it, and it will start to become alive to you. If you read some of this information from Benjamin Creme, start to apply it, and even some of the teachings of Maitreya, without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Without peace, there could be no future. I'm convinced that that's a mantra. If you say it, it starts to open your heart up to the fact that we are one and what to do about it, right? If you start to look at some of the teachings of Maitreya, honesty of mind, sincerity of spirit, and detachment, if you're doing that on a daily basis, why would you even want to look for anything new? Because that simple teaching is all it is. There's so much truth to that, that it can awaken in your hearts, the fact that we are one and so forth. So, something to think about, but I appreciate the comment. All right. And the question. Now the next one is a comment, and then there's a question that they ask of the commenteur. This one comes from my friend from the Middle East. It says, in about a week, Maitreya or Sanat Kumara or one of them will send a new message on the lips of the Apostle Tayana Moksha. And we've spoken about her at great length in some of these videos because he brings her up a lot. And then this next person asked of the questionnaire, not of me, are you one of the masters of wisdom or just an average Joe? So, whoever S is, I can assure you that the person who put the comment up there about Tayana Moksha is not a master of wisdom. Now, I can say that with a certain degree of certainty because the fact that none of the masters other than Maitreya are out speaking directly to humanity at this time. There are masters who are now in modern cities like New York, San Francisco, LA, London, Geneva, Rome, Moscow, Darjeeling, Beijing, Paris, and Tokyo. To name a few, there might be some and some other ones, but those are the ones that I know of. But none of them are speaking directly to humanity, starting to teach humanity directly. They're waiting for Maitreya to come out and declare himself before the world, and that won't happen until the day of declaration. Now, what the day of declaration is that is when we, the people, will demand from our news media, Maitreya, by whatever name he is using now on TV, to speak directly to humanity at one time. And what has been said by Benjamin Creme's master that will happen is Maitreya will come to the podium, there'll be all the cameras on him linked by all the satellites and so forth. And when we're waiting for him to speak, and after he's introduced, he won't say anything out loud. We'll hear everything he said inwardly in our own language, in our own head. So if you're from the United States, you'll hear him in American. If you're from England, you hear him in English, Whether it's the Queen English or Cockney, I don't know. Okay. If you're from France, you'll hear him in French. German in German. Italians will hear him in Italian and so forth. If you're from the Philippines, you'll hear him in Tagalog or whatever dialect is your mother dialect, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So there's no misunderstanding. Nobody will have to read any subtitles to hear what he's saying. We'll all hear it, understand it in our own language, whatever language we understand the best. Now, also, it has been said that he will start to talk about the long history that humanity's been. There was a time that he will explain to us when humanity was living at a much higher spiritual level, even though maybe weren't quite as advanced as we are now technologically, but we lived at a very high level of spirituality. There was a time when the word to steal did not even exist in the vocabulary of mankind. And then he'll show how far we've fallen to this depth of materiality that we are today, where every one of us are totally scared of our own shadow, our own neighbor, getting misfed lies after lies after lies, don't know which way to turn, whether it's right or left, greedy, competing against one another, fighting against one another, countries spending billions, perhaps trillions of dollars, on better ways to kill people and so forth. I mean, the world that we're living in is not the world that we should be living in. So he's going to show us how far we've fallen. And then it's also been said, I think, if I remember correctly, he's going to show us a vision of the future that is awaiting humanity. I'm sure one future, because it's two different futures, and humanity has to make the choice. One future, from Maitreya's perspective, if we do not accept the principle of sharing, what it's going to look like at that time, if we don't do it, and how life will end on this planet for each and every one of us. Without exception, every one of us will die if we do not accept the principle of sharing, because our environment will die, or we will destroy ourselves militarily with the nuclear bomb, Then he will also show us what life will look like if we do accept the principle of sharing. How wonderful it will be for every single one of us. How we'll see ourselves and each other as we should see each other, as divine souls in incarnation, living a life like that, peacefully, cooperating with one another, nations working together to solve the problems. We'll see what it's going to look like and what kind of life it's going to take on its own. So we'll be able to see it for ourselves from his perspective, and then we can all make the choice to either do something about it or not. Now, Maitreya does say the end is known from the beginning, and he already knows the choice that humanity is going to make, and as he put it, our choice has already made him glad. So he knows we're going to make the right choice. So that's one of the three things that are going to happen on that day. Then the love of the Christ is going to flow out in tremendous potency, not only from Maitreya, but also from our own hearts. And it will be, as Maitreya says, as if he embraces all of humanity. We will feel his love even physically. And then there will be millions upon millions of spontaneous cures that will happen on that day. And that is when he will declare himself as Maitreya. And not one master will come out before that. And then we will all know that that's Maitreya, and then we'll start to look to him for more advice. Of course, we'll start to be more inspired to take on the changes of and solve the problems of the world, like ending hunger and so forth, helping the environment, SOP, saving our planet, as one of the masters put it. And then he'll start to introduce these masters more and more one-on-one, one by one by one. And this isn't in the order in which he's going to do it. I'm just listing off a few of them. The Master Jesus, the Master Kudhumi, who was the Master John, who was the Apostle John, the Master Moria, who was the Apostle Peter, the Master Hilarion, who was the Master Hilarion, who was the Apostle Paul, the Master who was Comte de Saint-Germain, who's known now as the Master Ricusi, the Master Joao Kuhl, who wrote the books through Alice Bailey and so forth. And then, of course, we'll start to introduce some of the other masters who are living in the cities, the master in Tokyo, the master in New York, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And then Benjamin Creme's master, of course. So we'll get to know these masters. We'll be able to see what being a master is really like from these masters firsthand. So we'll see what manifesting our divinity moment to moment is really like, So hopefully that helps. But just to kind of drive home the point, there will never be a master commenting on this channel. Or at least until Maitreya, he comes out and says, maybe after that there'll be masters that come. I doubt it, but anyway, but you get my point, right? So hopefully that helps. Alrighty, and then lastly, Aisha asks this question: who is Maitreya, Raj Patel, or do you not know? Well, Maitreya, I guess the way you're kind of asking the question, I don't want to not answer it the way that I want to answer it in what you're asking. So if you're saying who is Maitreya as Maitreya, he is the one awaited by all the world's religions, and he's the master of all the masters. If you're asking by what name is he using on television, and was he Raj Patel, then the answer is no, he was not Raj Patel. And let me tell you why I know he's not Raj Patel. There's several reasons. One, Maitreya, when you recognize Maitreya on TV, you'll understand what I'm saying by this. But when he speaks, you don't even have to listen really to what he's saying. And the times that I saw Maitreya was like that. He said things in a way that was so simple, but was so powerfully true, and with so much love and will behind it, that I didn't have to try to remember it. I just remembered it. When I heard Raj Patel's interview, of course, there was this flurry about, oh my God, that's, Benjamin Creme made the announcement that Maitreya gave an interview on TV, and people were just scouring the internet trying to find anything that they thought was Maitreya, and they landed on Raj Patel because he's an Indian fella talking about social justice. But the way he speaks, his speech patterns, and the energy behind what he said did not fit the MO of Maitreya, because I had to go back and actually listen several times to what he was saying just to understand what he was saying. He's an intellectual talking about social justice to intellectuals. So that was one way that I knew that he wasn't Maitreya. The other thing was, and you might not have been familiar with this, but if anyone who read Benjamin Creme's books as long as I did, Benjamin Creme said several times that when Maitreya comes out on TV, he's not going to declare himself as Maitreya until the day of declaration. But eventually, certain people would start to recognize him as Maitreya and would ask him something to that effect. Are you Maitreya? Are you the Christ? Are you the Imam Mahdi, perhaps? Or are you the world teacher? Are you the one that Benjamin Creme talked about? Whatever the question they asked. And he would neither confirm it nor deny it. So listen to what I said. He would neither confirm nor deny that he was Maitreya. Raj Patel, when asked if he was Maitreya, rightfully so, denied it. So that would show you right there that he's not Maitreya. But most of the people who thought he was Maitreya didn't really study the information coming from Benjamin Creme as much as a lot of us did, that knew right away he wasn't Maitreya. The other thing is I have a friend, a very good friend in New York, who right after Raj Patel's, all this fiasco came up with Raj Patel, she and I were talking on the phone, and she was like, Gary, I saw Raj Patel at a dinner party, a couple years ago. And this would have been before Maitreya was starting to travel the world. He would have still been in London and not gone to dinner parties in that way. So, and she goes, I know he's just an ordinary guy. He's an incredible person. And I think Raj Patel is onto something. I do think that his message is on point and so forth. But no, he's not Maitreya. And to kind of go back to the point about the way that he speaks, Benjamin Creme even talked about this years and years and years ago, and years before he made the announcement that Maitreya was on TV. But he said that there was a gentleman who came to his lecture who actually was invited at some point to see Maitreya in London. Maitreya was giving talks in one of the mosques in the Asian community of London called the Brick Lane community, if I'm not mistaken, and would give talks at a semi-regular basis, but it was by invitation only. And this gentleman, for whatever reason, was invited to Maitreya's lecture, and he told Benjamin Creme, he goes, you don't even have to listen and try to retain what Maitreya is saying. You just feel it in your heart. You can feel the truth of what he's saying just by how he's saying it. And the times that I saw him, I can tell you that that's my exact experience with him. Now, I have not seen Maitreya as he is in London. I saw him as a familiar, but it's the same thing. And he spoke very simply, but very powerfully. And Raj Patel does not speak very simply at all. He speaks like an intellectual, very fast, and that kind of thing. So hopefully that puts that to rest. And the other thing I was going to say too, I want to say this before I forget. Benjamin Creme made the announcement in January 2010 that Maitreya was on TV. And if you go back and listen to his announcement, he never once said that Maitreya gave his interview in January of 2010. Now, did he? And so he could have very easily been talking about Maitreya's first interview that happened sometime before that. So maybe months before that. And if you knew Benjamin Creme as well as I did, and I'm not claiming to know him better than everybody else, I'm just telling you how much, I've known the guy, I knew the guy for over 20 years. And there were times He did it with me personally, but he also did it with the group that he worked with, where he left out, he didn't say something, not to be tricky or to be clever, but he did it as a lesson for us, so we had to use our intuition on what he was trying to say. Even his own master, did it to him when he was learning this. He was saying he was working with his master about some esoteric principles, and he said to his master, "Is that it? Am I right?" And he said, "Yes, that's it." "Oh, that's it exactly," is what he said. I always forget to say the exactly. And then he asked him another question about something. Am I right about that? And he goes, "Yeah, that's it exactly." And his master kept saying the same phrase, "That's it exactly," over and over and over again. And finally, Benjamin Creme said he started to think to himself, there's a reason why his master is saying it like this. And what does that mean? So as he said, he kind of smelled a rat, right? So he asked his master in a different way, and his master said, "That's it exactly, as you see it." So these masters don't just give you the answer. Sometimes you have to kind of figure it out on your own. They never infringe on our free will. So I think Benjamin Creme also could have very well said it when he said it, knowing that we would have to learn to start to recognize Maitreya. But if you know Maitreya and you know this information, you would be very confident in knowing that that's not Raj Patel. Now, moving forward, I'll say this, because this channel is going to be up here for a while, and I'm going to be talking, putting these videos up. At some point, people are going to start to recognize Maitreya more and more, for sure. Now, it's important that we do not discuss who we think Maitreya is on TV. I will not answer the question. I will erase your comment. If you put the comment back up, I'm going to remove your ability to comment. Because we're not supposed to discuss it. And I don't want to know who you think Maitreya is on TV, and I want to discover it for myself. And if we talk about it with other people, "Oh, I think that guy's Maitreya," you've now robbed that person of the gift of being able to recognize what he's saying, the truth of what he's saying, but also the truth that he is the one awaited by all the world's religions. And I don't want to do that. So hopefully you don't as well. So anyway, hopefully that helps. Hopefully I've answered the questions. And like I said, if you have any questions in the future you want to ask, feel free to ask them by posting your questions in the comment. Yeah, guys, have a great day. You take care. And help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.